So President Donald Trump is reportedly growing increasingly irritated at Dr. Anthony Fauci. So now that is his director of National Institute of Allergy and Infectious Diseases. And the reason why is because Dr. Fauci keeps publicly correcting Donald Trump's misstatements about the current health crisis. Oops. I guess you don't want to do that. All right. So now, sources tell the New York Times that Trump has, quote, become frustrated with Dr. Fauci's blunt approach at the briefing lectern, which often contradicts things that the president has just said, and likely, of course, things that the president had heard on Fox News, right? Which, by the way, Fox News is now just barely starting to treat this seriously. So much so they got one of their hosts, Trish Reagan, who they kicked off the air for spreading this kind of dangerous misinformation. Just think about it this way: the Fox News audience is like 69 plus, right? They're the most susceptible to COVID-19. Probably not the best thing to go and spread misinformation within that crowd, unless, of course, you want to kill your audience. I don't think you want to do that, right? I wouldn't want to, but anyway. So now, look, president's getting upset. I'm going to take a line out of Joe Biden's book and say I have no sympathy for that, or I have no empathy for that, right? Or are you getting upset? Oh, I'm sorry that reality has a bias that contradicts your very narrow thinking, right? Well, how about you shove your ego aside for once and let the doctor do his job? And that is not spread misinformation, to actually disseminate information that is helpful to combating this current crisis. But look, to be fair, he kind of has. Now, the president has given Fauci more leeway to contradict him than he has with other officials. However, because he knows that Dr. Fauci is seen as credible and with a large swath of the public and with journalists. So now the reasoning, of course, comes down to, well, I can't get too mad at him because, well, I mean, he's credible and the media's going to go after me for it. And they're so mean to me all the time. In fact, he's, came out and said, complained on Twitter earlier before, the media, they're always so mean to me, always so mad at me. Oh, geez. Here we go. Right? It's always about Donald Trump. It's always about his ego. And of course, when he spreads falsehoods and gets called out on them by people inside his own administration, that frustrates him the most. Now, the Times also reported that Trump's frustration with Dr. Fauci is part of a broader frustration with medical experts in the White House who have pushed for the policy of social distancing. So now, the policy of social distancing, of course, has had a very negative effect on the economy. Again, it goes back to Donald Trump's entire rationale for getting reelected is the economy is very, very good. I've been a very good steward of the stock market. Well, the stock market's down. The stock market is a wreck. It's a disaster. The economy is a wreck and a disaster. And look, I was pointing out all the different trouble spots before, but apparently it took a pandemic to push it over the edge. And so now we're in free fall. Disaster. And Donald Trump's entire rationale for being reelected just kind of evaporated and went up in smoke. Now, of course, that's not going to prevent Trump from still getting probably around 20, 30% of the electorate, because those people are basically like, let's vote for Trump to own the libs, basically. We don't care about anything except owning the libs and making liberals cry. So those are the people you cannot reason with. They don't really care about the country, don't care about America. All they care about is, yeah, I hate those guys. And that makes them sad. Okay. Well, congratulations. You're an idiot. But, okay. So now, anyway, social distancing has had an effect, but it's good policy because it's what we need. And we should have been advised to actually do it earlier. And so there was inaction. Look, there was inaction by our government. There was inaction by the Chinese government. There was inaction by the Italian government. And so there were failures at all around the world that have allowed this thing to get out of hand, that has allowed this thing to spread. And now we are in a crisis situation. And now we actually have to do things that are smart. And unfortunately, that's going to have a negative impact on the broader overall economy because right now, our economy is frozen. If you have to social distance, you can't exactly participate in the economy as much as as much as you normally would. I mean, there are things that we cannot avoid doing. For example, grocery stores, they are essential. Gas stations, they are essential. And that's basically it. Government function, essential. Mail services, essential. But there's, of course, ways of doing those jobs where you can work at home. And of course, there's a lot of people who are able to adapt their jobs to be able to work at home. But there's also many who can't, who are unable to do that. And so they're left out of the economy, and we need solutions for them as well. So now, back to Trump, right? And his big disagreement with all these medical experts that are pushing this sound policy. The Times reported that there's been a growing sentiment that medical experts were allowed to set policy that hurt the economy. And there's been a push to find ways to let people start returning to work. That right now, that would be the worst idea. Now, a couple of months from now, when everything's settled down and there aren't any new cases, okay, then that would be a time to start getting things ramped back up, right? But the way that it's going now, we've got to have aggressive action in order to stop the spread of this thing. And so, I mean, what are you thinking? What are you thinking? No, we've got to shut this down so we can ride the whole thing out. It just, I mean, if not, people's lives are at stake. Don't be stupid. Shut down all non-essentials. We need to institute a UBI that is adequate, at least $2,000 a month until, per person, until this crisis subsides. Also, invoke the Defense Production Act so we can manufacture masks, ventilators, other medical supplies that are necessary. And by the way, that will keep people in work and also practice social distancing to protect the vulnerable. If not, this continues to get worse and it will drag on longer and not get better. And so that's the thing. The sooner we do all of this stuff and then get it over with, the shorter time we actually have to do it. But if we keep messing it up and not practicing the social distancing and, all this stuff, we're going to drag this out. And it's going to be even more of a disaster for the economy. So we've got to do this. We've got to do this now. Nonetheless, it seems like only Republicans right now are only worried about one thing, at least the ones that are not in isolation right now. Some Republican lawmakers, according to the Times, have pleaded with the White House to find ways to restart the economy, as well as financial markets. As financial markets continue to slide in job losses for April's, could be in the millions, it could be up to 30%. But look, we need to worry about the afterwards, right? Right now, American citizens need money in their hands. They need essentials for food, medicine, rent, mortgages, if they decide not to suspend those things, which they absolutely should, right? We need immediate stimulus measures just to keep people afloat. That's what we should be focused on, not restarting the economy afterwards. Because look, we're probably heading towards a Great Depression, right? And really, there's no way of avoiding that situation right now. So we have to do the best that we can do in order to minimize the damage of that so that eventually we can get back to business and get back to normal. And that is not going to be anytime soon, which is why we need to have radical intervention unlike what we've ever seen before. You think you think the bailouts during the financial crisis of 2008 we're a lot of money, we're radical. No. We need massive amounts because it's not the same thing. It's not that there are millions of people that were willing and ready to work and the bank infrastructure fails. No. There are millions of people that now are unable to get out of the house and work. We're in a completely different situation, and it's completely uncharted in our modern system. And so we've got to work around that and, and figure out what to do going forward. But first, we've got to make sure people's needs are met before we can do anything else. Because if not, all of this is about to get that much worse. Hey guys, hopefully you enjoyed that free video. Now I'm going to have to ask you a favor. Between the demonetization and the YouTube algorithm messing around with view counts, etc., we're having a hard time adjusting to the new YouTube reality, which is where you guys come in. See, we have a Patreon, patreon.com/TYTNation, set up to help us rely on you guys, the viewers, instead of big corporate ads. Look, you know the show. You know how I'm not in favor of big corporations anyway. So help us transition away from relying on the ad model to pay the bills and sign up to be a patron, patreon.com/TYTNation. That goes a long way to help us keep the lights on. And you guys will know that you're supporting independent, progressive media.